Scott Franks. I'm the preaching minister here. If we have not met, I want to add my welcome. So glad that you're here. Hope you're blessed by your morning with us. I think you found a special place. We are in a series called God's Good Design, and we are exploring the scriptures to see how God has designed us to thrive in this life, to thrive in all of our relationships. And right now, we're talking about the relationship of marriage. We're spending a few weeks on that particular relationship. So if you are married, or if you were married, I want you to try to remember now, just for a moment, what you were thinking and hoping on your wedding day. What were you expecting? How did you imagine married life was going to be like? To kind of help us get into that place, I thought it'd be fun to flip through the wedding albums from some Oakdale members. And so for a couple minutes, you're going to see some of our wedding photos. Let's go ahead and advance that first slide. It should just automatically go. Okay. Now, I need to explain this one probably. When Jessica sent me her wedding photos, she also sent me a couple of these, and there's a little story behind these I want to explain. Here's what Jessica said. Jared and I got the chance to visit my aunt and uncle at Disney World before we got engaged, and I was so convinced he was going to propose there, I kept taking selfies so I could practice my surprise face. But Jared kept jumping in, not knowing what I was actually doing. He, in fact, did not propose on that trip. Hey, Jessica, you're not getting a ring. Surprise! Yeah. So I just wanted, there's so much hope and optimism on that wedding day, isn't there? Ronnie White, next is ours. Ronnie White officiated our wedding. And he offered premarital counseling, and I said we wouldn't need that. My attitude was basically, we love each other. It'll all work out. I literally did this. 18 years later, I called Ronnie and apologized. That I was so smug and naive, because life taught me all those feelings that you have on your wedding day, they won't be there on some days of your marriage. The guy up on the screen, this next picture is John Gottman. Dr. Gottman is a psychology professor at the University of Washington, and he's done extensive longitudinal studies of married couples in what he calls the love lab. So what he does in the love lab is he brings a couple to an apartment for a weekend, and he observes with remote cameras their interactions and their conversations with each other. And he claims he can predict with 91% accuracy whether a couple will stay together or get divorced. He looks for certain signs that indicate a couple is in trouble. Now, you will always have some complaints about the person that you live with. There's going to be you're going to do some things differently. You're not going to agree on everything. But here's what he says he looks for. He says, when your criticism targets the other person's character, why are you so selfish? Why are you always so lazy? Why do you not care about me? Is that why you keep doing this? When it's not just about the behavior, but about your spouse's character, that type of criticism leads to contempt. And contempt is a sense of superiority over your spouse. All he's good for is whatever, fill in the blank. I'll just go ahead and do it myself because, once again, it's all on me. Sarcasm, belittling him to your mother or your friends, that's how contempt is conveyed. And contempt leads to avoidance. Because your spouse is going to stonewall or get defensive or tune you out or just avoid you. And understandably so. But during a season of marital unhappiness, spending time together actually takes on even more importance. I read from another researcher named Joanna Berry, who's a professional marriage counselor, and she writes a lot on this stuff. And here's what she says about the tendency to, once you feel contempt, to avoid. Here's what she says about that. I have never seen a couple who is having problems who's also having quality time. Never. Instead, they're having problems, so they spend less time together in order to avoid the conflict, and then what they think is the solution, avoiding each other, becomes the problem. Now, obviously, there are a few people who are dealing with huge issues, like an alcoholic spouse, and that's a different situation. But she says, I'm talking about most couples here. And with most couples, how they fell in love was always about spending time together. So it makes no sense to get married and stop doing the thing that made you fall in love. So her homework assignment for couples is often this. She tells them to just be with each other for 30 minutes daily, during which there can be no fighting, no negative comments, and to go on a 2-hour date once a week. So what this comes down to, as with so many things when it comes to relationship, is presence, being together, and also communication. And your presence communicates some things, but it's not just what you say, but how you say it. So the Apostle Paul offers, I think, an incredibly valuable insight in his letter of Ephesians about how to communicate to your spouse and what they need to receive from you. Here's what Paul says in Ephesians 5:33. To sum up, each one of you is to love his wife as himself, and the wife is to respect her husband. Love him, love her, respect him. Now, of course, women want to feel loved, men want to feel respected, and that doesn't mean that women don't need respect and men don't need love. We all do. But what Paul is tapping into is the core desire in the souls of men and women. This is how we were designed by God. And this is how he sums up what feeds the soul of your spouse based on how God designed them. Will she hear this as loving? Will he perceive this as respectful? Man, if men would just stop and ask themselves, does this sound loving to her? And if women would just stop and ask themselves, will this make him feel respected by me? That would eliminate so much needless hurt. And guys, yeah, you may be saying what's true. You may be right. You may be identifying exactly what's wrong and needs to change. But if you come off as gruff and unloving to her, if you dismiss her need to be loved and to feel connected to you, you won't solve the issue that's separating you, and now you have another problem. 1 Corinthians 13:4, love is patient, love is kind. Now, when guys are together, we can tease each other. Man, you so ugly. And that's okay with us. I mean, that's how we express love, actually. That's how we express that, you're accepted. Doesn't work so well with women. If you don't know that guy, it doesn't work so well with women. They need to perceive kindness. And ladies, I know that you may feel you have to scream and nag to motivate him to do something. And you may default to that because out of desperation, or maybe because it worked once. So you may think, challenging him to man up is what you have to do. It might work, but that can also backfire into avoidance. And yes, guys talk like that to each other. Yes, his drill sergeant yells at him, or his coach grabs his face mask and chews him out. Men can challenge each other like that when they are developing other men. But it doesn't come off the same from the woman that he loves. So girls, you can motivate him and hold him accountable as a woman. You don't have to transform into something unfeminine and ugly to make things happen. Because out on that football field, out on that basketball court, there's another motivator more powerful than the yelling coach. Cheerleaders. If there's a pretty girl cheering for him, he'll run through a brick wall to impress her. So he needs you to be his cheerleader. Knowing that you are rooting for him, that you admire him, that you're declaring your pride in him, that will motivate him like you won't believe. Let him know he's more than just a paycheck to you. Let him know how important he is to your family, to your church. Respect him in front of others, especially your children. Cheer him on. 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others. Well, if love does not dishonor others, that means that love honors others, right? One of the best anniversary gifts I ever received is this box. Sherry gave me this box. And inside this box, she filled it with these strips of paper. And on the paper, she tells me the different things that she likes about me, the reasons that she's proud of me. I love how admired you are by many people. You've earned their respect, and that is impressive. I can't read that one to you. I read through those again this week, and there was some like, I love how you do the dishes before I even ask you to. And I started to realize there were several about doing chores. And I started to think, is this some sort of subliminal way that she's convincing me I like to do those chores? You like doing dishes, don't you, Scott? Yeah. Yes, you do. You're a good boy, aren't you? Yes, you are. Sherry's a smart woman. But I tell you what, guys, that's one of the best gifts I ever received. That has sat on my nightstand for years. And I love just going back once in a while and reading that again. There's no better gift Sherry's ever given me than that little box of affirmation. One more point on this. Make sure that what you're saying is not only true, but helpful. Years ago, I used to do workshops with, we had a professional career counselor in our church, and she had this section for the spouses of unemployed job seekers, which if you've been there, Sherry and I have been there, but if you've ever been in that situation, that is an especially fraught dynamic. You can say what you think is something that's not offensive, and it can really go in a bad way. And so you have to be very careful what you're saying to your unemployed spouse. And so what she said to those spouses was, be honest, but keep your honesty in helpful territory. For instance, saying, you should have never quit that job you had 5 years ago. That's why we're in this mess now. That may be true, but he can't go back in time to fix that mistake. Don't beat them up for what they can't change. So speak what will bring life to your future together. There is no future in I told you so. So if you get nothing else out of today, what I want to encourage you to do is, when you do have to say something and it's hard, be thinking about the future. Be communicating for your future together. Focus on a future together. It's so important. Gottman, the guy who has the Love Lab, he says marriages that avoid the contempt and avoidance death spiral have what he calls our repair attempts. And here's how important he says this is. The failure of repair attempts is an accurate marker for an unhappy future over 90% of the time. That's what he was looking for. That is what he could see was going to make or break this marriage. Well, wow, that's important. If you're telling me with one key action, you can predict with 90% accuracy the success of my marriage, I'm listening. So here's what he says. You need those repair attempts. Now, what's a repair attempt? A repair attempt is a recognizable, intentional attempt to provide an opening for the other. In other words, it's something that says, we still have a future together. There's an opening to say, we're still together, and there's still a future ahead of us. Now, I've encountered that same idea in that similar language from other counseling resources. Here's one I'd recommend. It's a podcast called More Than a Budget. You can find it on Spotify and other places. It's hosted by Jeff Fine Thomas, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and John Mitchell, who's a certified family planner or financial planner. You're not a family planner. Certified financial planner. And also one of the elders here at Oakdale. I love their approach because in this podcast you hear from both the financial side and from the marriage counseling side. I love what they do. But one of their episodes, the reason I bring it up is, one of their episodes is titled, Argue for Repair. Now usually when we argue, it's to prove that we're right, or it's to put the other person in their place. We're arguing about what has already happened. But it already happened. It's done. Arguing about it is not going to change that. So the only way that this argument will be productive is if we argue to learn something, to find a way to move forward together. And now sometimes it's best to not to force this immediately. Sometimes, in the heat of the moment, you might need to just disengage, give them space temporarily to calm down, to remember what's important, to not let this volcano blow and spew destruction that you're going to regret later. That's biblical wisdom. Proverbs says, sensible people control their temper. They earn respect by overlooking wrongs. So you can know you're right. You don't have to get your spouse to agree with you on that. That's not the priority. The goal is to understand where they are coming from and value them enough to listen, to protect your future together so that whatever you're arguing about doesn't harden into resentment. So let him or her know we're bigger than this. Whatever we're fighting about, my love for you is bigger than this fight. My respect for you is going to outlast this anger. What's holding us together is more than just our kids or financial security or a lack of better options. Come up with a sign to affirm we're okay. That's a repair attempt. And if you don't have that, where will all your anger and hurt go? It has nowhere to go except into contempt and avoidance. A great example of how important this is can be found in the Old Testament, the story of Job. If you know that story, in a matter of hours, this man named Job loses all 10 of his children. All of his kids are killed. All of his livestock and wealth is taken. And then he loses his health. He's covered. He's a broken man covered with these oozing sores from head to toe. All he's got left is his wife and a few friends. And here's what happens. Job 2, verse 8. And Job took a piece of broken pottery and he scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. And his wife said to him, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." And he replied, "You're talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" So this disaster just tears the veneer off their marriage. To be fair, I mean, she's lost everything too. Those were also her children. And so, yeah, it'd be understandable after a gut-wrenching loss like that to mentally go to a dark place, to be shattered and angry. But curse God and die? That means she sees no future for them as a couple. She would just assume that Job was dead too, even though none of this was his fault. She says, you might as well be dead too. That's what I think. Where do you go from there? I mean, there is no future there. There is no on-ramp back to each other. Now, to compare Job's wife to this example, I quoted last week from Shaunti Feldhahn's book, and she has a series of interviews with people who've been through some marital struggles. This particular woman that I'm going to read this quote from, she's been married more than 35 years. But here's what she said was a part of those years. She says, "We used to get so angry with each other. More than once, we were facing the question, do we want to stay in this marriage or don't we? And I'd come to the conclusion that it didn't have anything to do with feelings of love at this point. I started thinking either I can accept him the way he is and be patient with him, or I need to move out. And then I started going back to church and getting in with others who were sticking with it. And I realized moving out wasn't an option. And I saw how much happier they were because it wasn't." We'll talk more about that in a future lesson. I also saw what God really asks. Forgive. Lay aside your pride. I realized I had to make a conscious decision to forgive. Still, there was a day I had enough, and I was finally leaving. But he wanted me to come back inside the house, and he was holding out a mug of coffee. And reaching out and taking it was such a struggle. But because of my faith, I knew it was the right thing to do. Now, I had to see in him that he was willing to change and get himself right too, which over time he has. But the next time I was furious and just wanted to stomp away, I looked at that coffee mug in the cupboard and I went to get it, and then I held it out to him. And he took it, and we started talking. Now, we just pantomime holding out the coffee mug, and the other person reaches out to take it. That's how we start rebuilding. That was their sign, offering an invisible coffee mug. That was how they said, "We're bigger than this. We will repair this. I don't like you right now, but I love you, and I want you in my future." Keep the door open. So finally, church, keep the door open to your spouse. That's how you prevent yourself from lapsing into contempt. You know, when you give someone the spare key to your house, what does that mean? That means they're always welcome. They can always come and let themselves in, and you're okay with that. That's what these experts are saying to do in your marriage. Give your spouse the spare key to you. And yeah, there may be some doors slammed shut in your house during an argument, but there needs to be a commitment that no door will stay closed and locked. But if that's going to happen, you must be willing to bring something to your marriage that is so misunderstood, and that is submission.
For the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about submission. We're talking about headship and submission. And when I talk about submission, that applies to both husbands and wives, just so we're clear on that. That's what I'm going to share with you next Sunday. And I'm going to tell you, what I'm going to start sharing with you the next couple of weeks, it's going to sound foolish to the people outside. It's going to sound foolish. But when you hear what the Bible calls us to, and when you understand what biblical submission looks like in practice, I think you're going to want this in your marriage. You're going to want this kind of marriage. That's where we're headed next 2 Sundays. Thank you for being here. Let's sing.